Hey everybody, Nick Espinosa, your chief security fanatic here. And this week's deep dive is going to be on the news. We have a problem with the news, and we have a bigger problem upcoming with it. And I think these things need to be addressed. Now, what got me thinking about this was a really interesting article in Ars Technica by Benj Edwards and Ashley Bellinger. And I think this is one where, quite frankly, we all need to be talking about it. And while they primed this with their article, there's a lot more going on that they don't touch on. And I think it's important to understand what's going on. So with that, let's dive in, because this past Wednesday, Axios broke the news that OpenAI, maker of ChatGPT, had signed deals with The Atlantic and Vox Media that will allow OpenAI to license both of their editorials' content to further train their language models. Obviously, some of the writers and the unions that represent them are not really happy about this. Both unions are expressing surprise and concern over this and obviously sounding alarm. So, a statement from the Atlantic Union, and I quote, "The unionized members of the Atlantic editorial and business and technology units are deeply troubled by the opaque agreement the Atlantic has made with OpenAI, and especially by management's complete lack of transparency about what the agreement entails and how it will affect our work." End quote. Now, the Vox Union, no slouch there, they represent The Verge, SB Nation, and Vulture, among other publications, basically said something similar, quote, "Today, members of the Vox Media Union were informed without warning that Vox Media entered into a, quote, strategic content and product partnership, end quote, with OpenAI. As both journalists and workers, we have serious concerns about this partnership, which we believe could adversely impact members of our union, not to mention the well-documented ethical and environmental concerns surrounding the use of generative AI," end quote. And yes, there have been obviously big issues with this, of them ripping off copyrighted content, something they openly admitted to essentially to the House of Lords in the United Kingdom, as well as other governing bodies, not to mention the accusations that Sam Altman, founder of OpenAI, is playing fast and loose with all this kind of stuff, and that basically all of the OpenAI models are simply breaking the law to train their models at breakneck speed due to the AI race. So it seems to me that OpenAI is angling to train basically a version of its large language model to focus on specifically delivering news content. Now, this is not something that the Ars Technica article mentioned. I'm basically going off on my own here, but this is where I think this is going. And to be clear, local newspapers and publications have been using artificial intelligence to write articles for quite some time now, well before the large language model boom we've seen in the last couple of years. But those are usually minor articles. They really don't have longitudinal consequences to the general public. They're publishing things like the local sports score. So high school football team A played high school football team B, that kind of thing, or announcements about the local farmers market changing its hours of operations. These are things that are important in the moment if I'm going to show up at the farmers market and they're not open, but it doesn't have longitudinal impact on who we are as a society or what our outlook is. So when we start to see important news being reported by artificial intelligence or opinion pieces authored by AI, this is a serious can of worms that we are opening up here. Now, think about it this way. Just longitudinally, artificial intelligence has been known to hallucinate. So, if it's writing authoritative articles in known authoritative publications, that's a problem. There is a plethora of hallucination. Quite frankly, I've got it to hallucinate for me. I wrote an article for Forbes and also Smerconish CNN where, I basically asked the AI, do you know who Nick Espinosa is? This was ChatGPT 3.5. And it said, I have no idea, who Nick Espinosa is. And so I fed it one line out of my bio after a time. Oh, do you know he did this? Do you know he did that? Et cetera, et cetera. And it said, I still don't know who he is. But at the end, I asked it, now that you know all this information on Nick Espinosa, will you tell the world about who he is if anybody asks? And it said, absolutely, I will. More than happy to do it. Nick Espinosa is in cybersecurity, blah, blah, blah. And I know that's not what it's going to do. But what did it do in that moment? It was attempting to anticipate, given all of the information, what it thought was my intent. Meaning, it assumed my intent was to train it to tell the world who Nick Espinosa is, when my intent was simply to feed it information to see if it could lie to me, and lie it did. And so this is obviously a huge issue. On top of this, if we have artificial intelligence writing more important articles beyond high school scores or when the farmer market is open, this is also going to continue the issue of job displacement. This is something I've talked about, quite a lot. Do we need universal basic income? Do we not? I genuinely don't know. I think we need to have open discussions on that. We know that, per Goldman Sachs and others, 300 million jobs affected, 30 million displaced right out of the gate. And that's going to continue to increase as we continue this creative destruction at breakneck speed. It's going to be a huge problem. And so what are you going to do with these unique writers, these unique players that could have opinion pieces? In the same way that Tom Hanks came out and said, well, AI is so good that when Tom Hanks is dead, they can just take his likeness, put it into an AI, and Tom Hanks can continue to act, well beyond the grave. And if it has his mannerisms, has his, feel, if you will, because we all know who Tom Hanks is, then what necessarily is lost? And that's the question, and that's the issue, especially when you're talking about opinion pieces on everything from politics to science to just news of the world. On top of it, we have to understand that AI creators have bias. And so by virtue of that, what biases are being built into the artificial intelligence that longitudinally over time will slant an artificial intelligence? And therefore, if it's publishing in a trusted source and you don't necessarily understand if you're listening to or reading an artificial intelligence output, well, that starts skewing your worldview. We've already seen vast disinformation campaigns spun up, spewing out demonstrably false and misleading information, and millions, literally millions of people are taking this as fact. We are seeing this in the 2024 election. I don't care what you believe, who you're voting for. This is simply what's happening right now, not to mention in elections around the world where we are seeing this. We have seen intelligence apparatuses from adversarial countries, at least adversarial to the United States, spinning up disinformation campaigns that, quite frankly, we've been able to trace back to things like the Internet Research Agency and others. And some people believe this information because it fits their worldview so well that they simply don't believe it's false when we have vast evidence to say otherwise. And ultimately, what I think is happening here is an erosion of trust. Now look at The Atlantic, just that publication itself, not to mention all of the others that I've mentioned. For decades, literally decades, The Atlantic has been viewed as an excellent source for thoughtful opinion articles on a myriad of topics, not just politics. And obviously in today's deeply divided world, that there's a lot of people that look at The Atlantic and say it's a liberal rag or whatever it is. But the point is that it has been there for decades, offering opinion on topics inside and outside of politics, and they're always thoughtfully written. I may not necessarily agree with the author, but I appreciate the approach and I appreciate the logic of even positions that disagree with me. But if an artificial intelligence is writing these articles, that's a very serious problem, because quite frankly, again, when it comes to bias and everything else, what I'm looking for is the thought of a human. I'm not looking for an AI that is, let's say, gaining aspects of like the 10 greatest writers and then putting out something that's an approximation of that. I want unique thought. And that's something that the AIs, at least at the moment, really don't have an issue with this. So I am absolutely concerned when I see The Atlantic or Vox and all of its publications go down this road, because if they are displacing actual authors and opinion pieces with artificial intelligence generated based off of, let's say, a writer. So some writer has written 100 different articles. The AI says, yeah, I can pretty much do this. I understand this author's slant and worldview and all that kind of stuff and reproduce it. We're going to fundamentally miss something. The other side of the coin is that artificial intelligence is now pumping out so much that roughly half per studies or more of the content released now on the internet is AI generated. It's not unique to humans. And so if artificial intelligences are training on what is being pumped out on the internet, they're training on other AIs, which therefore poisons the well. So think about it this way. I have a painting, let's say, in my house. I pick up my phone, I take a picture of that painting. You come over, you see the picture on my phone, and you pull out your phone and take a picture of my phone's picture. And then let's say your friend comes over and takes a picture of your picture on the phone, which is a picture of my picture, which is a picture of the original. And you start to see the problem that we have here. And so this is not something that's going away anytime soon. We are essentially being reckless with the speed with which AI is being developed, and there are multiple reasons for that. Aside from the fact there's a race to do this, obviously nobody wants to be left behind, especially on, let's say, the military or intelligence side. There's a lot of concern over this, and obviously the laws around the world, no matter how on it, the governing system is, or government is around the world, they're always behind innovation. And therefore, we, the people, are left in the wind, whether it's privacy rights or something else. So this is a huge problem. We're going to see where this goes, but quite frankly, if we are looking at reading nothing but AI generated content because the major publications that have offered unique and interesting thought over the decades are going this way, we lose something as society, as a humanity, as a collective body that wants to generate new and interesting ideas. And so as I'm thinking through this longitudinally, we are setting ourselves up for an issue outside of the fact that we're already seeing a lot of newspapers and other originating news sources simply close down or consolidate, which is another problem in and of itself. Throw artificial intelligence into that, and we have a very serious problem on our hands. So I'll leave you with that thought, but I think it's a huge problem, and it's something that we absolutely need to address. And so that is your deep dive of the week. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please attempt to stay private. Thanks, everybody.